Hey everybody, this is Ian Griffin with Nyle Dry Kilns up here in Maine. We're in the process of cleaning out the chamber here for another test load, and we want to talk about some of the myths and misconceptions about small scale DH drying and really even some of the larger scale DH drying. And we're going to get into a couple of those here in a minute. We have some talk about fans and fan reversals, whether or not they're necessary. We have some talk about heat treating, how you go about doing that. Other good airflow concepts with the kiln. So let's get started. So we've seen some misconceptions about our Nyle kilns don't have kiln duty motors in them, basically motors that aren't rated for the heat and the environment of being in a kiln. I will say straight up, we've been making kilns for nearly 50 years now. If we didn't put kiln duty motors in them, we would have probably had a pretty rough time by now. So we're gonna take a quick look at them and we're gonna talk about them. Basically, this is a regular L200 chamber. Comes standard with the four kiln duty motors, and they are non-reversible. And that's another thing that comes up in conversation a lot. Why don't your fans reverse? A lot of large kilns have reversible fans. If you don't reverse, are you gonna dry evenly? And what we've found over the years is that the tipping point for needing reversible fans is when you get airflow saturation. So if you're pulling off enough moisture off of the lumber that it can no longer hold any more moisture in the air, that's when you've hit the point where you need to worry about airflow reversal. That doesn't ever happen until you're pushing through about 10 feet of lumber. So in a small chamber like this or a container chamber, you're only pushing through about 4 to 6, depending on how it's set up. So you never need to worry about saturating your air, and reversing your fans is never an issue. On a larger chamber with 10 feet or plus, we have chambers as deep as 20, 30 feet. You're 100% going to need reversible fans because you will saturate that air and it won't dry on the far side, and you'll need to turn around and hit it with the fresh, dry air coming the other way. So another myth is about capacity, which I guess isn't really a myth because any kind of kiln, whether it's a DH kiln or a conventional kiln, is going to have a capacity. Maybe that'll be physical on what you can actually get in the chamber, but you'll find sometimes it's actually about the equipment as well. All of our compressors have a set amount of water that they can remove per day. Per 24 hours is how we standardize most of our measuring here at Nyle, at least. And what that means is that if you have really, really fast drying softwoods, you're going to be pulling moisture out so fast that you may not be able to remove it quick enough if your compressor's kind of small or not sized correctly for the amount of wood you're dealing. So what we typically do is if you have an L200 like this one right here, we've historically set up to 4,000 board feet of hardwood and about 1,500 board feet of softwood. We've made a lot of kind of leaps and bounds over the years, including a new hybrid mode that comes with the L200 Pro that can basically skyrocket that green lumber limit for softwood up to about 2,500 and possibly even up to about 3,000 feet. We're still doing some tests. Now what that does is it basically maximizes the equipment by running the compressor as a heat source as opposed to just a water removal source. That keeps the compressor running more often, and it'll also kick your vents on to vent moisture, not just to cool your kiln like a traditional DH setup would. So there's a lot to look forward to with that, and there's a lot of potential with how much board foot we can actually dry with one of these at one time. And the other thing about the capacity that's important to talk about is all those numbers that we say in our marketing and everything are very limited to green lumber. All those measurements are, you have 4,000 board feet of say green red oak, or you have 1,500 board feet of green eastern white pine, whatever species you're dealing with. If you're air drying or you have other parts of your process that can cause the lumber to be going in at a lower moisture content, then that capacity goes up because you're going to be pulling moisture out a lot more slowly. So if you have air dried eastern white pine down to say 25%, you could probably get about 4,000 board feet in here and it wouldn't skip a beat. But if it's going in at 70 or 80%, then you're probably talking about that traditional 1,500, maybe up to 2,000 board feet for a DH mode. But if you have the hybrid mode, we might be getting up to about 3,000. So I want to keep talking about the airflow stuff a little bit more. I'm going to put this baffle back down to continue that, just to help illustrate my point. So when you're drying lumber, everyone talks about baffling all the time. It's like you got to be baffled correctly. You got to make sure the air is going through the wood. But what's actually happening? So when these doors are closed, there's a wall right here, And what's actually going on is these fans will pressurize on this wall. So it's not like a perfectly clean loop, it's actually building pressure. And what that pressure does is it back pressures and forces the air through the lumber. So because air is like water, it'll take the path of least resistance. Every larger gap allows more air through it and you get faster airspeed through those gaps. It's basically kind of a volume equation. If you have a bigger hole, you can fit more air through it. So if you baffle off those bigger holes, the gaps along the bottom of the lumber, any gaps on the side, as much as you can, you know, there's a certain limit of what's actually practical, that all helps force lumber through the wood. Now, if you had, say, a setup where your fan was on the end and you were trying to circulate air through the lumber like in a different direction, you'd have such a long area you're trying to pressurize here, it's going to definitely affect your back pressure flow through the stacks. So in theory, you could add some kind of angling or some kind of baffling over here that would make a more even pressure through the stack. But the reason kilns are traditionally shaped like this, with the air kind of going through the lumber in this direction, it's a lot easier to pressurize on a clean plenum chamber evenly across one side, as opposed to from one end. It's going to be significantly more difficult to get equal pressures through the stack if you were coming from the side. So another myth slash misconception about drying with a small scale DH unit is that you can't heat treat. You can't set the pitch and pine. You can't do anything like that. You're only limited to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, so you're never going to be able to kill all the bugs. Well, there are workarounds. Basically, that limitation for temperature is entirely based off compressor operation. So if your compressor is running, then yes, you are limited to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. However, heat treating, you don't have to be running your compressor for that. In fact, you really only need heat. You're no longer trying to remove moisture at that particular step. So you can say shut off your compressor, you can crank your heat right up, you can kill all the bugs, you can set your pitch and pine, whatever setting you need. We'll actually, we'll put a little link right here to a video about heat treating with a small scale L series, and you guys can check that out as well. So another thing it's important to talk about when you're heat treating with a L series kiln like this one here is heating capacity. So the base model for an L53, the heater is 1 kilowatt, 1,000 watts. The base model for an L200, this unit right here, is 4,000 watts, 4 kilowatts. So if you're heat treating a lot or at higher temperatures, if you're trying to say set the pitch and pine up to 160 degrees or something like that, you may find that it takes a long time to get up to temperature. But we do sell auxiliary heat boosters like that one right up there above the unit. And those can range anywhere depending on what model you have, what's compatible with the 53 or the 200, from an additional 4 kilowatts up to 30 kilowatts. So if you had a base model L200 with 4 kilowatts and you got a 30 kilowatt heat booster, you basically more than quadrupled, you 8 times almost your heating capacity. Alrighty, well, hopefully that covers a lot of the topics, a lot of the common myths and misconceptions about DH drying. If you guys have any other things we didn't talk about today, or anything you have questions or concerns about drying with a small scale DH or a larger DH, or just kiln drying in general, feel free to leave it down in the comments and we'd be happy to reach out to you and answer it.